March 17th, 2001. 19-year-old Serena Williams defeated Kim Clijsters to lift the trophy at Indian Wells. This match would become one of the most scandalous and controversial matches in tennis history and would ultimately cause Serena and her sister Venus to boycott the tournament for 14 years. Fast forward to March 13th, 2015, 10 years ago today. Serena Williams returned to Indian Wells to end her 14-year boycott. This is a story of why the Williams sisters left Indian Wells behind and why they came back over a decade later. Hey everyone, I'm Charles Connolly and you're watching The Break. Exactly 10 years ago today, Serena Williams walked onto stadium court at Indian Wells, ending her 14-year boycott of the tournament. Thousands of fans gave her a standing ovation in the second biggest outdoor tennis stadium in the world. Indian Wells is one of the most prestigious tournaments on the tennis calendar, but after an incident in 2001, the Williams sisters decided to remove the event from their schedule altogether. Let's rewind to that fateful year in the desert. Serena Williams was just 19 years old, but had already lifted the trophy at this event 2 years prior. She and her sister Venus had developed their game just 2 hours west, and it appeared that Indian Wells would become something of a home tournament for the Williams sisters. But that 2001 appearance changed everything. Venus and Serena had earned 4 wins to advance to the semifinals, where they were slated to face each other. But right before they were set to take the court, Venus pulled out with tendinitis in her knee. A packed stadium anticipating the greatest sister act in sports quickly turned on the Williams family. Fans assumed that their father, Richard Williams, had orchestrated the move to give Serena a better chance in the final. Now, this assumption was in line with some previous accusations of match fixing in the Williams family. According to some, this semifinal was just another example of Richard Williams calling the shots in his daughter's career, robbing the fans of a chance to watch them compete. And 2 days later, when Venus and Richard walked into that same stadium to watch Serena compete for the title, this happened.
Well, what an extraordinary reception from the crowd here.
Boos rained down on Richard and Venus. Both described hearing racial slurs among the booing. For the next 2 hours, Serena was subjected to heckling from her home crowd as she inched her way to a second Indian Wells title, eventually defeating Kim Clijsters.
You guys are a little tough today for me. And I would like to thank everyone that supported me, and if they didn't, I love you guys anyway. Thank you.
The animosity directed at the Williams family that day had clear connotations of racism. The mostly white crowd heckling and booing an American teenager at their home tournament was enough for the sisters to skip the event altogether for years to come, foregoing millions in prize money and thousands of potential ranking points to avoid reliving that moment. And Serena spoke about that moment with Will Smith on the Red Table Talk podcast.
I mean, it was hard. And I just remember I was losing and I didn't even care. I was like, I don't want to win. I just want to get out of this with dignity. It was so hard because I'll never forget driving back and Tundi was there. And I just remember getting in the car and I was just bawling. I was at the gas station. There was no celebration and I was just like crying and crying and crying. And I actually was more upset that they were booing my sister when she came down to walk. Like, why are you booing her? Like, that makes no sense, and my dad too as well.
So for the next 14 years, one of the most prominent tennis tournaments in America went without 2 of the most prominent American tennis players. Serena wrote about the experience in an essay for Time, saying, quote, "The undercurrent of racism was painful, confusing, and unfair. In a game I loved with all my heart, at one of my most cherished tournaments, I suddenly felt unwelcome, alone, and afraid." But on this day, March 13th, 2015, Serena ended her boycott. In that same essay for Time, Serena explained that in light of changes made on the WTA Tour and changes within herself, she would return to Indian Wells. As part of her return, Serena partnered with the Equal Justice Initiative to shed light on how they fight racial injustice and work to end mass incarceration and wrongful convictions in the United States. On a more personal note for Serena though, this was about forgiveness, letting go of the past, moving forward. She included in that Time article a quote about writing a different ending, and in her pre-tournament press conference at that 2015 Indian Wells, she spoke about her emotions returning to the desert.
When you do forgive and when you do try to let go, you have to let a lot of those emotions go as well. I'm looking forward actually to kind of stepping out on center court and letting the whole world know that it doesn't matter what you face, whether it's something that wasn't right, something that hurt you, hurt your family, you can just come out and be strong and say, I'm still gonna be here, I'm still gonna survive, and I'm still gonna be the best person that I can be.
And so, with the support of her father and sister Venus, she played. When she walked onto center court, that rewritten ending began with a match against Monica Niculescu. Now, if you know tennis, you know Monica Niculescu is probably not someone you want to play if you're nervous. She threw everything at Serena, but the world number one persevered to win her first match at Indian Wells in 14 years. Her next win was a quick 6-2, 6-love victory over Zarina Diaz. In the fourth round, a 3-set win over fellow American Sloane Stephens. And in the quarterfinals, Serena defeated Timea Bashinsky of Switzerland in straight sets. And then Serena was forced to withdraw before her semifinal match against Simona Halep with a right knee injury. Simona would go on to win the title. Serena made a run to the final the very next year, but lost to Victoria Azarenka. And Venus made her return to the desert that same year, 2016, but lost her opening match to Karumi Nara in round 2. She'd make the quarterfinals or better for the next 3 years though. And in 2018, fate brought Venus and Serena to the same court at Indian Wells. 17 years after the crowd forced them to leave this tournament behind, the sisters walked onto center court to a standing ovation. This time, the Williams sisters weren't up-and-comers. They were grown women who'd changed a sport. Serena was a new mother and the greatest of all time. Venus, a 7-time Grand Slam champion and trailblazer who'd fought for equal pay for women in pro tennis. They'd successfully rewritten their ending to the Indian Wells controversy, one that started with high hopes, soured amidst an ugly scandal. Now, Venus and Serena focused on the future and on forgiveness. In the 10 years since Serena returned to this tournament, we've seen similar scandals in pro tennis that call for something of a gut check, an audit of one's personal values. Whether that's speaking out against unfair treatment or bringing attention to an important social cause, tennis players are often faced with important off-court decisions. And just as the Williams sisters created a new blueprint for women's tennis, they created a legacy that transcends the sport. And this tournament, 2015 Indian Wells, is just one example of how Serena Williams set the tone for generations of young women, especially young black women, who came after her. Now, I'll end with a quote from her article in Time. "When I was booed at Indian Wells by what seemed like the whole world, my voice of doubt became real. I didn't understand what was going on in that moment, but worse, I had no desire to even win. It happened very quickly. Indian Wells was a pivotal moment of my story, and I am a part of the tournament's story as well. Together, we have a chance to write a different ending."